So, welcome everybody to this episode of Classroom Matters with me, your host, Kristy Houle. And once again, we are going to dive into an area of education that you might not be as aware of or think as much about. But I'm talking today with Jeff Danielian from the Gifted Association, or the National Association of Gifted Children. And we're going to kind of dive into how the gifted students are really handling these situations with the at-home learning. So I'm really excited that you're here, Jeff. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure. This is great.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background and what it is that you're doing with the association.
Yeah, so I'm the teacher resource specialist for NAGC, and my main priorities there are the Teaching for High Potential, which is our teacher publication for members. I work with the Javits Frazier Scholarship Program, which is a scholarship that we award to 12 teachers each year to attend convention. And I've also kind of dipped into managing the convention submission and review process. But basically, I'm there to answer questions from teachers, help package different resources and different things. I write a monthly column called The Teacher's Corner for the organization. So, and I'm also a full-time teacher as well.
Oh, wow. That's a heavy load.
Yeah. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. Keeps me busy.
Yeah, I bet. And you were mentioning when we were talking off air a little bit that your wife's a teacher as well.
She is. She's a first grade teacher. So, yeah.
So I'm sure with two educators in the house, that is causing quite a bit of scheduling chaos.
Yeah, there's a lot of Zooms between the two of us teaching and having two students also at home. So sometimes we're all on Zoom at the same time. I got to give it to the K-4 group, because my wife is just, I'm saying she's working 80 hours a week. I joke, but it's a lot to manage that age group right now, I think.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And so I want to kind of start off, Jeff. I was reading actually on your website this week, doing a little bit of, you guys have some great resources out there, by the way, too. I was very impressed with all of the items that you have for parents and teachers and students on the website. And we'll talk a little bit more about how folks can access that
Sure.
at the end of the episode. But there was an article that was placed on the website titled COVID-19 and Anxiety in Gifted Children. And something that really stuck out at me in that article, and I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about, was that we may not realize that, and it said worries and anxious thoughts can increase in the absence of intellectual stimulation. So talk to us a little bit about that, about how kids might be struggling a little bit that are on the gifted spectrum.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's no surprise that to folks who research gifted children, who work with gifted children, in general, they tend to be really sensitive to what's going on in the world, because they ask a lot of questions, because they, are actively seeking news and resources. They tend to have higher anxiety or higher intensity when looking at these situations. And so something like this that's happening, a pandemic, or if I recall, like when 9/11 happened, all these major events that happen, there's a lot of internalization that can go on there, because there's a lot of worry, because I think they tend to think about the problems from all different angles. And they're not just, it's not just like, oh, I'm worried I'm going to get sick. It's, is this the end of the world? And I say that kind of, I should also just take a step back, because I think it also lends itself to them wanting to solve these problems. So while there's this heightened anxiety and maybe some stress that comes along with living through something like this, there's also a strong feeling of them, for them to want to solve the problem or to find a solution. So that also can add to some stress too.
And it's funny that you're saying that, because as I was reading the article, I was noticing, though, that there are some things that parents can do to sort of help relax those thoughts, I guess, a little bit, giving them, projects to work on during the COVID, giving them information. And so my question to you is, do you think it's better for them or worse to really let them explore what's happening around the world with this pandemic, or do you think that's a little too scary for them because they do overthink things?
Yeah. I mean, my feeling is it depends on kind of the age and maybe how advanced they are in their learning or their understanding of things. Because I say, students in middle school and high school, I find this is the perfect opportunity to connect really any of the branches of learning to this. So you've got the biological sciences, you've got sociology and psychology connections. There's math connections with all the data that's coming in. Historical perspectives. Even so much as like business and economy. So I think if you can hone in on maybe what their passions and interests are. So maybe you have a student that's really into biology, then let's explore this, looking for truth, looking for scientific research. Or if it's a student who's interested in math, let's look at disease spread. Let's try to go to a place where we can understand it educationally. And that might allow them to kind of, like I said, not only want to solve the problem, but kind of reduce that stress and anxiety. But I think, and all teachers are kind of saying this now, especially with the social emotional piece, is really listening to what they want to know and exploring those questions together. If you're at a younger level, like say my wife's students are in first grade, then you kind of have to take it step by step and maybe look at maybe just historical things, maybe finding some books and some newspaper articles, even from the 1917, 1918 pandemic, where you found those good stories there, and just try to be positive. But I think listening to them, I think it's important for them to know the truth. And I think it's important for them to understand the realities of actually what's going on. But to understand the statistics, I think, is also important too, because if we look at the numbers and we look at the news, one of the biggest things is just shut the news off as much as you can, especially for the younger groups, because I think there is a lot of fear that's projected there, and can be misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Do you think that's harder for parents to do than it is for teachers since, we're sort of prone to want to protect our kids?
I think it is. I would think it is, especially like you said, coming from a teacher's perspective, we want to try to find the learning in these things. And I think we don't know the situations that these families are living in within their houses right now. They could have relatives that are sick and in the hospital. Their parents could be sick with it. They might have a mom or dad sitting in a room closed off in quarantine. So, yeah, I think I said to some parent friends of mine on the phone the other day, because they have younger children, to really start exploring some of these educational opportunities that are out there. I mean, there's so many good things that are coming from this educationally. And don't be afraid to read up on it. Like you said, go to our website, see what we have. Go to, Edutopia has been putting out some great things too. I think there's a lot of resources that parents might be they wouldn't naturally go to. They wouldn't go to that because they're leaving it up to us, but we're not there all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And along those same lines in that same article, it really struck me. And I actually had to go watch the clip on YouTube. They mentioned Mr. Rogers, our beloved Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, saying to look for the helpers in these types of situations. And so I was so intrigued by that.
Hmm.
There's a link to that little clip that he talks about that on YouTube. I had to watch
Yeah.
that. So talk to us a little bit about what that means when you're looking for helpers in a situation like this when you're teaching your kids at home.
Yeah. I mean, I love that clip too. I think that was part of the
I
special
know,
that
isn't
he
it
did
great?
after 9/11.
Yeah.
I think they asked him to come back and do a special for the kids. Yeah, I think there are so many of these good stories. I mean, that's the one thing, the ads that we're seeing and we're constantly hearing about the healthcare professionals and the frontline workers, even folks in the restaurant industry. So I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but I think as far as having them, like I said, when you gifted students, a lot of the prominent folks in the field really agree on one thing, and that is gifted students really want to contribute. And so I think if anything, the inspiring stories that we're seeing by the people that are helping and getting us through this, I think you're going to see a generation of students come through with a greater feeling of what that means, with a greater understanding of what it means to work those front lines and to be the heroes in those situations. You know.
Well, I think it also gives gifted students, so all students really, but I think gifted students more so have that sense of needing to have a purpose, right?
Right. Absolutely.
What are we doing? What's the purpose in this? Like, give me something to accomplish. And so that I think is helpful for them as well. It sort of might distract them from, okay, here's the negative things that are happening with this. And this might ease my anxiety to sort of have a purpose to help others feel better.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because I can tell you there is definitely a difference in the mindset of a non-gifted student and a gifted student. And, I've had a couple of other folks on the show, experts in the world of gifted education, and gifted does not just mean smart. And
Absolutely.
so
Right.
tell us
Right.
a little bit about the
Well,
difference. Like, what are some
yeah.
characteristics
Well,
of gifted kids?
I
My
think the
son's smart, but he's not gifted.
well, I think you've hit right on a really wonderful point, which is a lot of folks in the field, just because, let's say you're in advanced math. Okay, so we'll call you gifted in math, or maybe you have an advanced vocabulary, or you're reading at an early age. Those are all signs. Those are all characteristics, like you said, this sense of destiny or a sense of purpose. Um, maybe engineering, like an engineering mind. But I think a lot of folks in the field will feel that it can happen at any point in time in any situation. So you may have a student that was just this average student that was doing well in school, and there wasn't anything that you saw, and this inspired them to do something, and inspired them to have a passion, and and all of a sudden start excelling in this world that we never saw them doing before. So, one of my, I'm a student of Joe Renzulli, and he says at certain times, under certain conditions, that latent giftedness might become manifest given the situation. So I think I'm a believer. I'm in that camp, where it's not the the 180 IQ cutoff or the 132 cutoff that some states use. It really is about pursuing something with a passion and a desire to, whether it's make things better or create a product. Creative productivity is something that's really coming along. I've had some high school students that have been making masks at home because they sew, and they some of them, it might turn into a business for them, so they may end up going that route. But I think there are so many different definitions and so many different ways that people identify gifted students that if you strip all of that away, and we've kind of done that now that we're all sitting at home, you may start to see things that maybe wouldn't happen in the regular classroom. So like you were talking about, they see something on the news and they want to know about mask production, or they want to know about how these tests work, and that might stimulate some of these thoughts that they have. And then they might go online and start researching about it and thinking about it and writing things down and listening to, other podcasts and listening to things. So it really is about passion and motivation. I think those are the two things that I think about. And also creativity. I think creativity is very important. Creative thinking.
Do you think it's a little bit more challenging for folks that have a student that's gifted to keep them engaged and find the right resources for them now that we're all learning at home?
Yeah, yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it would be like a lot more pressure, right? Because you have kids at home, I have kids at home.
Hmm.
N- None of them are labeled as gifted, and so it's easier. I feel like for me just to like give them their schoolwork and find resources. And I
Hmm.
think I would be like feeling a lot of stress and pressure if I did have a student that was gifted coming to me from the public school system, and now I'm responsible for making sure that their little wheels are spinning and turning all the
Right.
time. I think that would be a very hard task.
Yeah, it is. And um, I think if we forget about like math problems and writing paragraphs and all the things that we kind of do in the classroom, and we start thinking about these new ideas, things that we've done in the gifted and talented field for a long time, which are these products and these projects that students can work on. So for instance, have your children have a Zoom or a Google Hangout with a relative and do an oral history with them, learning about history. I one time we were out of school for a week for it was a snowstorm. And so a bunch of teachers got together and we said, why don't we have them do a pretend travel blog? So they actually did a blog that was completely, made up. but they had to research countries, research cultural elements and pretend that they were traveling from country to country and exchanging money. Anything that they can learn something new about. Joe Renzulli calls those type 1 experiences, which are just showing kids all these things in the world that maybe they didn't know about. So whether that could be TED Talks, they could be online lectures, again, depending on the age group. My wife right now is using a lot of those how it's made programs. So she had the students watch about how Legos are made or how crayons are made. Anything just to have them learn something new and get excited about it. They might not, but just to move along. So there are a lot of different projects that you can do at home that don't require a lot of materials, but can really make a difference later on. You're developing those skills that they can continually use later on, like a podcast. So having your students, maybe having your children do a podcast about their favorite sports teams, or make a website about something, just because they're researching, they're organizing, they're classifying, and then they're communicating in a way that they can right now. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you're basically trying to, and I think that we should have done this a long time ago, even with kids that aren't labeled as gifted, but kind of doing away with the paper, pencil, sitting in front of problems all day, and really letting kids learn organically and be creative and learn based on their passions, and really diving deeper into topics instead of just the surface level of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Do you think so many times it's hard for us as, like, I'm sure you've been in the field of education forever. I've been in it over 20 years. So I've seen changes in the teaching styles over and over and over. It's something new every year. And I know a lot of parents were raised in environments of education where it was, you're sitting and you're getting the information and you're regurgitating it. So do you think it's just a really big challenge for a lot of us to move past that and to teach more in a creative, organic, sort of child-led way?
It's funny because you say I've been, teaching 21 years too, so that's kind of funny. But I think it does take a shift. There is a shift that needs to happen. We've been trying to change the face of education for 60 years, because the more you teach this way, the more students you're going to uncover. Because they're gonna react to it. My best classes that I teach are where I present a little bit of information, I show the students some resources, and I let them go off and do it on their own and kind of check in. I'm not, yeah, you're right. Our parents grew up with teachers writing "good job" on the top of a page or "nice work," but if the student doesn't know what they did well, then they can't move on from that. And just to bring it back to that initial question you asked, I liken it, and I've heard this, and it's not my analogy, but with sports and the arts and music, it's inherently taught that way. So, if, let's say, you're learning the piano and you're learning a piece on the piano, just because if you learn it, then it's not like the piano teacher is going to say, okay, play that for the next 6 months. Don't move ahead. Just keep playing that. No, the minute you master something, you move on and you move on and you move on. And it's the students that dictate that. They let you know what they need. I listen to my students all the time. I'm constantly saying, what do you want? What do you want to learn about? And an easy shift for me, I tell teachers all the time, for me, it's about skill and content. So, for example, if I'm teaching presentation skills, so like a slideshow or a PowerPoint or a Prezi, if the goal is to teach the skill, then let them do it on whatever they want. They choose the theme, they choose the topic. But if you're teaching a piece of content like the Civil War or even COVID-19, then let them present that to you in any way that they want to: a podcast, a diorama, a report, an oral presentation. If you mix it up like that, they feel invested in it because either they're interested in the topic, or they're interested. If they're not interested, let's say, in the Civil War, at least their assessment, or at least their work, is in a format that they enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of giving them choice, either in the content or in the skill, depending on what you're choosing. They automatically feel invested in it, and it's something exciting for them. If you assign a 5-paragraph essay about the Civil War to all the kids, you just lost 50% of them immediately, because
Oh, yeah.
either they don't like the essay or they don't like the Civil War or they don't like both, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it's any different than it is for adults, right? I mean,
Right.
we're given sort of the autonomy and the ownership when we arrive at a place in our life where we are professionals and we're working and collaborating with the team. Your boss isn't saying do this exactly this way. They're saying this is the end result. This is sort of what we want to see. Now let's get to it and work on it together, however we need to get there, and make it meaningful. And so
Absolutely.
yeah, I think just, and you're so right when you talk about kids being asked to do these, historical things. I think just giving them choice. I've
Hmm.
noticed with my middle schooler saying, okay, here's three important pieces of history that we need to learn about this year. Pick which one you want to learn about first, and then let's pick out how you want to learn about it.
Exactly.
And then let's decide how you want to come back and talk to me about what you've learned.
Absolutely.
And he's loved that, I mean, he's done everything from watch documentaries to read living books to
Hmm.
whatever. Um, but he's come up with the conclusion of what happened in that period of time and the important pieces of it, not necessarily
Absolutely.
a specific date or person's name, but I think it does. I think you have a great point there about it frees kids up to feel really invested and be more interested in the pieces of it that's interesting to them because, right, we could both be learning about the Vietnam War and there might be a piece of it that you're more interested in that I may
Hmm.
not be as interested in.
Right.
So yeah, I think that that's just really great ideas and strategies. And I think it kind of, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. It might take some pressure off of parents, especially now at a time when they are really ultimately responsible for the number of hours their kids work and a lot of things that their kids are doing during the day. I would think it would take some of the pressure off to not have to have these specific plans written for the kids to do this and this and this. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, again, I think it comes with age. I think if you look at preschool and early, even early entrance to kindergarten, K to 3, um, the structure is really important there. But again, you'll have some students that are, like I said, some of these smaller things that they could watch or take part in. I even with a K to 3, have them do like a reading timeline of their favorite books. Go back to their old bookshelves at home, or books that they remember, and talk about maybe reread them, even if it's children's books, and why they love them. Do
Yeah,
something
just a
like
book
that with them.
review.
Yeah, you know, and like you were talking about your son with the documentary, if they're into that format, then let's explore documentaries and let's take out the iPhone or the iPad and do a documentary about your neighborhood, in the style of a documentary that you're watching. I think when students realize that they have all this capability at their fingertips, and I mean, with the internet now, they can find out anything. You can get primary source
Sometimes
documents.
good,
Yes,
sometimes not
sometimes
good.
good, sometimes not so good. And that brings me to another point about not so good. When we talked about the social emotional kind of things in the beginning. You know, underachievement is a big problem where students will shut down, and they'll say, well, this is a lot of work and it would be easy for me not to do it because I know how much effort I want to put in and I know how I work, and it's just easier to not do that than to do it. So that's why I'm really big on it. It has to be something that they love. It has to be something that they're passionate about, or they're not going to feel invested in it,
Yeah.
you know.
So, where do you think we're gonna be at in the fall? Like, you're an educator, you work in a large association full of educators, you teach.
Yeah.
Where where do you think we're gonna be come August?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it a lot, and then I try not to think about it a lot.
I know, right?
Because this isn't my style. This isn't how I like to teach. Even though I'm doing the Zooms and I'm setting up Google Classrooms, I have 200 students in my independent program that are working on these projects on the side. And I'm there for them every day at school, and I'm not there for them right now. I'm open. I have open office hours. They can email me. Um, I don't know. I feel like it's going to end up being some kind of hybrid where, in a high school setting, you'll have some classes come in the morning, some classes come in the afternoon. I don't know how that's going to work with busing, but I can't see everybody sitting in a cafeteria, or roaming the halls when the bell rings
Yeah,
like we do.
I
Um,
know.
and my program is dependent on these. I meet in small groups with my students at lunchtime. So I need to figure out a way to, I mean, we're doing a great job. We're doing the best that we can. And
Sure.
I think I would like to see a lot of the governors and the education folks, the administrators, listen to the teachers. We're the ones who are going to know what's going to work. And I feel like in some cases, they're making a lot of teachers go to school until almost the end of June. We're working really hard. The students are working hard. Like you said, the parents are working hard. It might be time just to call it quits at the end of May and say,
Yeah,
all right, we lost
that's
the
what we're
last two
doing,
weeks.
Jeff.
Yeah, see, it makes sense. I mean, because there is a burnout that's going to come. And I feel like, I think your last podcast, he even talked about it. I took online classes during the summers during my master's program. It was okay, but it takes a long time to figure out how to do this really well. And we're doing it, and we're doing it as well as we can. But if it continues, you need that social aspect. You need those face to face. That's what teaching is all about. This is not teaching what we're doing. Like you said, we're providing resources, we're providing content, and we're there for them. But and I know in the end everything's going to be okay. It will all work itself out. But I feel bad for the seniors. I feel bad for the hopeful freshmen coming into a high school or junior high, starting in a new school. They're going to be starting in a different situation, I think, and the best we can do is just be there for them and make it as welcoming as possible, and just keep doing the best that we can.
Yeah. Well, and my hope is that if anything great comes out of this when we start in the fall and things do go back to somewhat normal, is that maybe some of these folks that have not been using as much of this technology that is at our fingertips have been forced to do it now, and they're much more comfortable with it. So I'm hoping that we see a lot of teachers going back into their classrooms, wanting to use Zoom, wanting to use Skype, wanting to use Google Hangouts, wanting to use all this technology and all the resources that they were forced into. During this time, now bringing that back into the classroom and opening those resources up in there.
Absolutely. I mean, even Zooming professionals in the field. So where you used to have to wait to get a guest speaker in, or it was
Right.
tough
And
to
now it's just like
organize.
on demand,
On
right?
demand, everybody, it's
It's
like,
awesome. And listen, Jeff, if everybody doesn't know how to use Zoom by
I
now,
know.
you've definitely
Well,
been living kind of under a rock,
and,
because
and
it is
it's
Zoom
right.
all day, every day in this house.
Well, it's certainly the end of snow days for us. There won't be any more
Oh
snow days,
no,
that's for sure.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
yeah,
So before we wrap up, you are an amazing guest. You have just been full of great information. I want to touch just a little bit before we end on the National Association for Gifted Children and the nagc.org website. What are we going to
sure.
find?
Yeah, so actually, right now, if you type in gifted children COVID-19 resources, we actually our parent expert, Kathleen Millis, and our other staff, Carolyn Kay, put together this wonderful resource page. So not only is there research journal access through Sage, which is the publisher of thousands of research journals for students and professionals who want to learn about this virus. There's also links to webinars and live chats that are all free to download and watch. There's a whole section on these great ideas for online teaching. We reached out to a whole bunch of professionals in the field and a whole bunch of educators in the field and kind of put together this great resource page. In general, you're going to find everything gifted on there. So if you don't know anything, if you need that gifted 101 and you just want to know what you could be looking for at home as a parent, as a teacher, what you could be, like you said, doing differently to kind of pull some of these things out in your classroom, you'll find out information about that. And where to go. We have a state by state section. So who to contact, because as people will find, state to state, district to district, it's a patchwork quilt. I mean, identification, services, which states require it, which don't, what are your options, when you do go to school. So, there's so much there where we could spend a whole episode talking about the resources on there. But I
I know,
think
right?
people,
We could.
yeah,
And you can donate, you can shop. They've
yeah,
got
you can
all kinds
donate, you
of
become
really
a
cool
member. I mean,
stuff.
that's the biggest thing is membership. I mean, that's what keeps us going. We advocate for the only federal funds given by the government for gifted and talented research. So it's really important.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. And I just wish you nothing but the best. Hopefully that, all of our listeners have gotten some insight about, how to help kids that are gifted, how to look for the giftedness in kids. And I'm sure that they're going to be using the National Association for Gifted Children website. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Kristy. It was a pleasure. This was fun.
Yeah, this was a good time. And this is Kristy Houle, your host of the Classroom Matters podcast. You can find this episode of the Classroom Matters podcast and many, many more on the educate.today website.